At the beginning of the movie, Nurse Marion, the same nurse from the original Halloween, sends her teenage neighbor Jimmy to investigate a break-in at her house. He proceeds to raid her fridge, where we can see a six-pack of Penn Pavel's beer on the shelf. This fictional beer company can be spotted in many films and TV shows. The Truman Show, Donnie Darko, and The Walking Dead are a few examples. But what is the reason for this? What is the connection between these seemingly random IPs? It goes back to the specialty print shop, the Earl Hayes Press, who produced this beverage prop as a neutral brand for several different productions. The Earl Hayes Press is most known for creating fake news articles for Hollywood. We see a lot of this during the opening titles for Halloween H20 20 years later, or as I'll be referring to it for the rest of this video for my time and your sanity, H2O. I know this breaks my usual shtick of exact pronunciations, but I'm gonna call it H2O because that's just how my brain interprets it. These articles contain some interesting details. To learn about that, plus all the ways that this movie interacted with the Scream franchise, who this lady really is, plus many other Easter eggs and secrets, stick around to the end of this video. Sponsored by Ridge Wallet, the slim, modern wallet that holds up to 12 cards, plus cash in over 30 colors including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. It's durable and comes with a lifetime warranty, plus every dollar you spend on Ridge Wallet before September 30th enters you to win a brand new upgraded Ford Bronco. Check out the link in the description and use code CZsWorld for 10% off. Welcome to another episode of Things You Missed. My name is Zach, aka CZ, and I'm analyzing the entire Halloween franchise here on this channel. There are many different routes you can travel on the Halloween Express. Currently, after Halloween 2, you can choose to continue on to Halloween 4 through 6, or you can opt for a different reality where nothing happens for the next 20 years until Halloween H2O. In this episode, no surprises, I'll be once again aided by Halloween expert Jimmy Champagne.
Directed by Steve Miner, this film represents a semi-rebirth for the franchise. It was the first Halloween movie to be released in summer, and it takes place in a fictional town called Summer Glen, the first return to the Golden State since Halloween 3. The title, H20, resembles H2O, the chemical compound for water. Despite that, there's no pools, no beaches, and we don't even get to see Michael Myers cutting up any girls in bikinis. Instead, it takes place in a boarding school where Laurie Strode lives a secret life as a headmistress under a false name. This is the third alias she's used: Laurie Strode, Laurie Myers, and now Carrie Tate, all to evade her murderous brother whose name precedes him. So go ahead, grab some sunscreen and a towel, and let's dive into the things you missed.
The opening song is Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes, the same song used in Halloween 2, where it tied into themes about dreams and the unconscious mind. In this case, it's more of a callback, but maybe also a slight reminder that Halloween 2 is still canon, while 4 through 6 are not. We actually hear the song again later in Laurie's car, and we see her react to it and turn it off. It's almost like she's reacting to her painful memories of Halloween 2, which wouldn't make any sense because the song was never used diegetically, meaning that we, the audience, could hear it, but the characters did not. So, I don't know, maybe Laurie is just not a Chordettes fan. The part where Laurie gets startled by the little girl in the clown costume is much more understandable, because it's well known that Michael wore a clown costume for his first attack. Back to the opening, we see that Nurse Marion is still a smoker, and she too has taken on a new last name, Whittington. It's not clear if this is also for protection, or if she just married at some point. After realizing that her home has been invaded, she goes to her neighbors for help, and they have a Halloween decoration of one of the Cenobites from the Hellraiser franchise. It's Butterball, the one that looks like the gritty live-action version of Patrick Star from SpongeBob if he were in a Matrix movie. Hellraiser, from the third movie onward, was produced and distributed by Dimension Films, who also did the 90s and 2000s Halloween films. You may remember the pinhead pumpkin I pointed out in the last movie, Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers.
Dude, if they ever remake this movie, instead of Butterball, they should definitely use Harvey Weinstein.
There's another horror icon referenced moments later when we see this kid dressed up as Jason from Friday the 13th. H2O director Steve Miner also did the second and third Friday the 13th films. Also, the detective in H2O is named Fitzsimmons, the same name as the police chief from Friday the 13th Part 3. The address of Marion's house is also a reference to one of Steve Miner's films.
Yeah, it's 4946 Cypress Pond.
The 4946 comes from the real location where the scene was shot, 4946 Melrose Hill Street, and Cypress Pond is an address referenced in Steve Miner's 1992 film Forever Young, which also stars Jamie Lee Curtis.
Susan Finley's address is 14 Cypress Pond Road.
Miner also has an uncredited cameo as this very apologetic school official who tells Molly about her financial aid situation.
He said he wasn't going to be there. I'm very sorry. I wish I could help.
But he promised the victim.
Brutal. One of the teens that helps Marion is wearing a hockey jersey with an L and a number 17 on it. The name Laurie starts with an L, and she was 17 during the original Halloween. Not sure if that's what they were going for there.
Either way, he's about to take a big L from our boy Michael Myers. His name is Allegre, a French word for happy, joyful, and cheerful, all of which he is until he dies. It turns out Michael ransacked Marion's office. There are papers everywhere and the file on Laurie Strode has been emptied. This scene is actually a parallel to Halloween 4 when Michael goes through Jamie's photo box and finds out she's related to Laurie Strode. Marion tries to turn on the lights but quickly realizes the power has been cut, which is another thing that Michael does in Halloween 4. Marion also has a picture of Loomis. When we see him, the music that's played resembles the music from the original film. The picture is also an homage to Donald Pleasence, who unfortunately died shortly after the filming of Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. One by one, Michael takes out everyone involved, starting with the teenage neighbors. One of them takes a skate to the head while watching Plan 9 from outer space, which seems to be an intentional callback to the original Halloween when Laurie and Tommy are watching The Thing from Another World. Both of these movies are sci-fi films from the 50s.
There's also this license plate, ITA 1959, the same year that Plan 9 from Outer Space came out. Coincidence? I think probably. And once again, Michael's attack on Nurse Marion results in him stealing a car. Grand Theft Auto Haddonfield. During the opening credits, we see Marion's collection of Michael Myers memorabilia, which she inherited from Dr. Loomis. We see articles from after his initial attack on his older sister in '63, and this one dated the day after the main events of Halloween 1978, before he goes into speculations about if Michael is still alive. There are photos of people that we've never seen before, which seems to suggest that Loomis or Marion suspected Michael of having other victims during the 20-year gap. There are a couple of mistakes in these articles, like this one that says Laurie Strode, sole survivor of October mass murders. This forgets about Loomis, Tommy, Lindsay, and Jimmy, all of whom survive.
Not me, Jimmy, the movie Jimmy, but not the H2O Jimmy, the old Jimmy. There are just too many Jimmys.
This article incorrectly states that the Halloween murders occurred in 1968. It was actually 78. Then there's this one. Authorities have no explanation for the disappearance of the headstone of Judith Myers from Memorial Cemetery. No explanation, huh? You don't think maybe it was, I don't know, Judith's brother, the same guy responsible for killing all those teenagers, one of whom was arranged under that very tombstone at the crime scene that same day? Not the most excellent deductive skills from Haddonfield PD. I went through the movie shot by shot to see what additional lore these articles contain. What I found was the truth behind how Michael escaped all of those years ago, but also a lot of other weird stuff. If you watch Things You Missed regularly, there are a lot of details in newspapers that come up on the show. Oftentimes we see a headline, but the content of the article is totally unrelated, because when you're watching the movie in real time, you don't have time to read the whole article. This one, from November 1963, starts as a legit story about Michael Myers, then changes topics mid-sentence. He is currently undergoing tests for a number of disorders. The boy has no history of violence. With the advent of modern medical imaging, third-term fetuses have been observed doing complicated dance movements. I sometimes find it frustrating when the filmmakers can't be bothered to just write a fake in-universe article, but in this case, he was so close to filling up the required space that the article takes up that it's making me think that the prop designers actually do this weird stuff on purpose or as like an inside joke or trivia item. This other article tells the story of how Michael actually escaped the sanitarium all those years ago by climbing out a second-story window and descending on a handmade rope consisting of stolen bed sheets, like something out of a cartoon. I don't really know what the point of all of that is, considering that Michael is invincible and can pretty quickly recover from any fall damage, as we see again towards the end of H2O when Laurie knocks him off the balcony as a callback to the original, and he survives both times.
They didn't even have to come up with something new to explain how he escaped. It's spelled out in the first movie when Marion and Loomis show up. Michael lets the inmates out and escapes in the chaos. We literally see them walking around.
And now that you mention it, yeah, you're 100% right. Once again, this article is 90% legit until they randomly start talking about Michael doing these complicated dance movements. I guess they call him the Boogeyman because he knows how to boogie. At least they know how to spell his name correctly though, unlike this article which spells it like the soap brand. Just when I thought I'd finally found a decent article about death row inmates, the story randomly starts talking about third-term fetuses doing complicated dance movements. It's gotta be some kind of inside joke.
One interesting detail in terms of the lore is that the article states that Laurie died in an auto accident. Not only is this how Laurie's parents died, it's also how she died in the Halloween 4 to 6 timeline. So that leads me to believe that this is a holdover from an earlier revision of the Halloween H2O script. See, the movie was originally planned to be a sequel to Halloween 6 before the idea of a new timeline was decided on. If you're looking really close, you can see the stained scissors from Halloween 4, but obviously that movie didn't happen in this movie's timeline. So we're just going to go ahead and assume that they were a pair of scissors used in the 20-year gap where Loomis was hunting down Michael. Or it could be an intentional Easter Easter egg to Halloween 4. I just don't want to give them that much credit.
After the opening credits, we see a long POV shot, a callback to the way the original Halloween began. You can also see white sheets blowing in the breeze. White sheets are a psychosexual motif that I talked about in the original Halloween. I pointed out how they come back in nearly every Halloween movie since. This all turns out to be a part of Laurie's nightmare, and it does a nice job of setting up the horror well before she sees this hauntingly familiar image when Michael is actually coming after them towards the end of the movie. Laurie is now an English teacher, which is fitting after we saw her excel in her high school English class back in the original. There's a reimagining of that scene where her son's girlfriend, Molly, is sitting in the back corner and sees Michael out the window, the same thing that happened to Laurie when she sat in that spot 2 decades prior. When Laurie calls on Molly to answer her question about Frankenstein, Molly talks about how Victor Frankenstein should have confronted his monster sooner to prevent Elizabeth's death.
I mean, the monster saw to that by killing off everybody that he loved. Victor finally had to face it. It was about redemption. It was his fate.
If you recall, during that Halloween afternoon in 1978, Laurie's curriculum talks about the idea of fate in the class that she's in. In the original, fate is described as an immovable force. In other words, Michael was an immovable force of nature that would come to Laurie, and there was nothing at all she could do to stop it. All she could really do is run and hide. But in H2O, fate is still portrayed as an inevitable confrontation. But Molly suggests that the character Victor Frankenstein has to face his fate in order to redeem himself, which, you know, is exactly what we see Laurie do in the most critical part of the story. This version of Laurie has been running and hiding every step of the way. Even when she has to confront Michael Myers in the first movie, it's usually done in self-defense.
There's even a banner in her classroom that says, "Learn from the past, live in the present, plan for the future," but she doesn't follow that advice herself. It's very clear that she's stuck in the past. She spends her whole life in fear of her brother's return, and there comes a point where she has the kids in the car with an opportunity to run away once again, but she remembers her own teachings in English class, and instead of fleeing, she goes back to kill her monster. This character arc is 3 movies in the making for her. But before we get there, let's talk about life at Hillcrest Academy. Actually, with that fancy font, it almost looks more like Killcrest Academy. Where do I enroll?
So are you studying to be a killer or a final boy?
No comments. Laurie is very overprotective of her teenage son, and as a side effect, kind of prevents him from living his life. As this unfolds, we see her grab a box of Life cereal and put it away for safekeeping. This feels somehow symbolic. Even John's friends make fun of him for it.
20 years from now, you're still gonna be living with her. Probably running some weird motel out in the middle of
no
nowhere.
Yosemite?
Yep, it wouldn't be a Things You Missed episode if there wasn't some kind of reference to Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 horror classic, Psycho. If you somehow haven't seen it, it's about a character named Norman Bates, who at one point lives with his mother, Norma Bates, and they run the appropriately titled family business, The Bates Motel. Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays Laurie, is the daughter of Janet Leigh, who stars in Psycho, and she also makes a cameo in H2O where her name is Norma.
Oh, good morning, Miss Tate. Morning, Norma.
Norma is the one to deliver this line.
Well, hey, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
Which is the same iconic line that Sheriff Brackett has in the original and later on in Halloween Kills. During that conversation, Norma senses Laurie's distress and offers some maternal advice.
I know it's not my place. If I could be maternal for a moment.
Which is funny because, again, that is her actual mother in real life.
It's all so corny. It kills me every time I see it.
As she walks away, we hear a little piece of Bernard Herrmann's musical score from Psycho, and she returns to her vehicle, which is just like the one her character drives in Psycho. It even has the same license plate number. That was probably enough of a Psycho homage, but hey, why not just add one more in there?
Psycho.
I also noticed some music by H2O's composer John Ottman that isn't from Psycho, but is very reminiscent of Bernard Herrmann's style.
Unfortunately for Ottman, some of the music was taken out and literally just straight up replaced with music from Scream. The scene where Michael chases them through the corridors uses the music from the garage scene in Scream. And part of the intro with Nurse Marion uses some of the music from the Casey Becker intro in Scream. In fact, you probably realized that H2O's intro itself is very similar to the intro from Scream. Both involve a woman who's home alone and realizes she's being stalked at the front and back door, who then contacts the police, but before they arrive, runs outside to try and escape.
In fact, there are many elements from H2O that just scream, from the contemporary media references to the Northern California setting. And there are 2 reasons for this. 1, Scream came out in 1996 and revitalized the slasher genre in a way that 1995's Curse of Michael Myers did not. Kevin Williamson was heavily involved in writing the script despite not getting the final on-screen credit. 2, the original Halloween was heavily featured in Scream as the movie that all the kids watch at Stumacher's Halloween party. The Halloween franchise would link back to Scream by showing Scream 2 as the movie that Molly and Sarah have on the TV TV in their dorm room. Scream 2 is also the Scream movie that takes place on campus, much like H2O. If you've seen my Scream Things You Missed, you know all about how the intro of Scream has a part where Mr. Becker discovers their home has been broken into and tells his wife to go down the street to the Mackenzies' house to call the police.
Get in the car. Drive down to the Mackenzies. Call the police.
This was a reference to the original Halloween, where Laurie tells Tommy and Lindsay to go call the police from the Mackenzies. So in H2O, the Halloween franchise responds by having Laurie tell the kids to call the police from the Beckers.
I want you to drive down the street to the Beckers. It's a mile down the road. Tell them to call an ambulance and get the police.
There was even a connection between Ghostface and Michael Myers. H2O Michael was played by Chris Durand, who was under the Ghostface mask for parts of Scream 2. As much as I could go on about the newfound relationship between Halloween and Scream, we haven't even begun to talk about who Laurie was talking to on the phone, connections to the original movie that you might have overlooked, and the rest of the things you missed. The group of students staying back from Hillcrest Academy's Yosemite field trip consists of two couples. In the original Halloween, there are also two teen couples, Annie and Paul being the first, Linda and Bob being the second. Like the teens from Halloween, these kids only have one thing on their minds.
Food.
The whole place would be empty. We'd have the run of it. Could have a roaming orgy.
I love the way this man thinks.
Unlike last time, however, this time, Laurie is also getting in on the romantic activities. She's dating the guidance counselor, Mr. Brennan, who brings a pumpkin over to her dwelling on Halloween night.
I thought we'd do this right.
History is kind of repeating itself here. In 1978, Laurie brought a pumpkin along to her babysitting job to carve with Tommy. There are a number of small moments like this that serve as homages to Halloween. For example, after hanging Sarah, Michael does the same head tilt that he did after killing Bob Sims in the original, almost as if he's admiring his work. Actually, the very idea of hanging Sarah from above like a Halloween decoration calls back to what Michael later did with Bob, where he was strung up in a closet. This moment where Laurie and Michael come face to face in the window harkens back to the brief eye contact they made 20 years prior when Laurie pulled off her brother's mask. Not long after, she hides the kids in a closet, the same strat she used to hide Tommy and Lindsay all of those years ago. She even uses the same line.
Do as I say now!
Mr. Brennan's death involves him being stabbed and lifted off the ground with a knife, the same fate that we saw befall the nurse from Halloween 2. And after temporarily knocking out Michael, Laurie makes the same mistake that she made in the original by dropping the knife. At the end, we see Michael get break-yeeted out the front windshield, as he was in Halloween 4. Before the rampage, Mr. Brennan goes to check on all the students remaining on campus. But did anyone find his word choice kind of ominous?
Sarah? Molly? Just checking on the Hillcrest remains.
A little strange, considering one of them would soon become a pile of human remains. And then when John makes the little map for Molly and sends it down the dumbwaiter, it looks innocent enough, but what's this? I recognize this from our Purge videos. That's an Iron Cross. John Tate is Nazi confirmed. I also think I found where they got the title of this movie from.
20 years. 20 years. Don't you think he would have shown up by now?
No, obviously not. After classes get out that afternoon, we see Laurie making a phone call as the buses are loaded for Yosemite. And I just realized that it's a Bell South phone, the same as what Casey Becker uses in Scream. She's talking to a woman named Mrs. Cheney.
Mrs. Cheney, can I call you right back?
The name Cheney is usually eponymous in the horror genre because of Lon Chaney, probably the most iconic silent movie actor of all time. Cheney was known for his portrayal of an array of monsters, which is most fitting for this Halloween movie where the central theme is so focused on Laurie going back to kill her monster. Unfortunately, Mr. Brennan nearly shoots an innocent man in the process. He got a little too jumpy when the security guard Ronnie came up to check on them. If we go back and slow down that scene, it is actually Michael approaching in that first shot, but when we cut back after Brennan fires the gun, it's now Ronnie. At first it seems kind of like the movie is trying to cheat the audience, but when you think back, it actually is consistent with how hallucinations are handled earlier in the film. There are instances where Laurie has visions of Michael and she has to close her eyes for a moment to realize that it's actually someone else. Steve Miner made the choice to show us what the characters think they see rather than showing us the objective truth, and I think it's a good tactic to make the audience feel like they're more in the moment. This is also not the first or last time someone has been mistaken for the boogeyman. Ben Tramer got killed for wearing the mask in 2.
R.I.P. Ben Tramer.
Ted Hollister got shot in 4. Spitz was killed by Michael Myers after dressing up as him in 5. Freddie Harris nearly got beat down in Resurrection. We don't really care about that one. And Mr. Tivoli got angry mobbed in Kills.
That one was just weird.
As much as I love H2O's story and how it does something different with the Halloween formula, it's hard to get past the fact that Michael Myers just doesn't look very scary in it. A lot of this goes back to the mask. I could try to talk about this, but I know someone who studies the Michael Myers mask like his life depends on it. Here's Jimmy Champagne.
This movie has a very similar problem to Halloween 4, where I like the vast majority of the characters, the kills, the setting, pretty much everything about it is cool, but there's one glaring issue holding it back, and that is the mask. Or in this case, masks. By our count, Halloween H2O uses 3 real masks and 1 CGI monstrosity. None of them are really what I would call good, but some are definitely better than others. Either way, Michael's overall look in this movie is just a complete mess, to me at least.
Outside of the mask, there are a couple other moments that took away from the horror. I love when Laurie walks through the corridor looking for Michael, but then we turn back and we just see him lowering himself down with one arm. I like how they've added a new move to his repertoire, but like, where was he when Laurie walked by? There's not that much space right here. I need to see this whole maneuver. And then when she's hiding under the tables, I don't get why he can't just bend down and see where she's hiding. I know that wouldn't be as suspenseful, but it just doesn't make sense that he doesn't think to do this. Ultimately, this allows Laurie to stab him with the California flag, which is probably symbolic of something, but I don't really know, and later drive him off a cliff and chop his head off, finally putting an end to her 20-year war with Michael Myers. Or so we thought. Because Michael Myers cannot die as long as you have $20 in your pocket. Next up on Things You Missed, a resurrection would soon be upon us. Someone kill me.
Even I cannot defend resurrection.
Remember to subscribe to CZ's World for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications. I will, I suppose, see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.